Everest. But not the climb itself today.
Oh,
Yeah, we're doing something a little different this time.
okay, cool.
Yeah, so this deep dive is going to be all about how the mountain itself might look in 2075.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Oh,
yeah, you were asking about the future of Everest, and we've got a ton of great sources to dig into for this one.
yeah. Like what?
Well, we've got a really interesting Smithsonian article,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's this scientific paper with some hard data,
Cool.
and even a news website chiming in with like a global perspective.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so I guess my first question I have is, everyone knows Everest is like the world's highest peak, right?
Right.
But I was today years old when I learned that it's actually still growing.
Oh, yeah.
Seriously, mountains grow.
They do. Yeah, it's kind of funny, isn't it? We think of mountains as these like eternal giants,
Right.
but the truth is they're always changing.
Oh, that's mind-blowing to me already.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
It all comes down to like what's happening beneath the surface, you know?
Okay.
So imagine the Earth's crust, like this giant puzzle
Right.
with pieces that are always moving and bumping into each other, and those pieces are called tectonic plates.
Okay, so like a super slow motion puzzle rearranging itself over millions of years.
Exactly. And the Himalayas, including Everest, were formed by one of these epic slow-motion collisions.
Wow.
The Indian subcontinent has been steadily smashing into Asia for ages,
Crazy.
and that force just keeps pushing the mountains up.
So it's like a geological fender bender that never ends,
Mm.
and Everest is just getting taller and taller.
Pretty much. Yeah.
That's wild. But how much taller are we talking? Like, is it even noticeable?
No, this Smithsonian article points out something really interesting.
Okay.
Everest is actually growing faster than some of its neighbors. And get this, it's not just because of that tectonic collision.
Hold on, there's more.
Yeah.
I'm all ears. What else is going on?
You might find this surprising, but erosion plays a huge role.
Erosion.
Yeah. Specifically, the erosion caused by these two rivers, the Arun and Kosi, they actually help Everest grow taller.
Wait, how does that work? I thought erosion wears things down.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But think about it like a ship carrying a heavy load.
Okay.
As it unloads cargo, it rises higher in the water.
Okay, I can picture that.
Right. So the Earth's crust is like the ship, and the mountains are like the cargo.
Okay.
Exactly. As those rivers cut through rock and carry it away,
Mhm.
it's like they're unloading cargo from the Earth's crust.
Oh, I see.
This lets the crust rise up a bit, a process called isostatic rebound.
Isostatic rebound.
Yeah, and that rebound actually makes the mountain taller.
Wow, that is a brilliant analogy.
Thanks.
So erosion is basically giving Everest a little boost.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And the article says this river-driven growth adds about 2 millimeters to Everest's height every year.
2 millimeters.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like much, but over time...
Hold on, let me grab my calculator.
Oh.
Okay, so by 2075, that's like 10 centimeters taller.
Right, yeah.
Not exactly a growth spurt you can see with the naked eye,
Uh-huh,
but still pretty impressive for a mountain.
for sure.
So that's just from the rivers.
Well, it's worth noting that these are just estimates, you know?
Right.
Things like climate change and earthquake activity could also affect Everest's height in the future.
Right. Because mountains don't exactly have a predictable schedule, do they?
No, they don't.
But we do have some pretty cool ways to track these changes, right?
We do.
The scientific paper mentioned something about using GPS to measure Everest's growth.
That's right. Scientists can now measure Everest's height with incredible accuracy thanks to GPS technology.
Wow.
They even mention a guy named Wally Berg who managed to get a GPS receiver right near the summit.
Talk about dedication.
Haha, I know, right?
So it sounds like we're getting a much clearer picture of how mountains like Everest are constantly changing and evolving.
Yeah, for sure.
But is this whole isostatic rebound thing happening everywhere, or is it just a Himalayan phenomenon?
Great question. It's definitely not limited to the Himalayas. For example, Scandinavia is still slowly rising after being weighed down by massive glaciers during the last ice age.
Whoa. So even though those glaciers melted thousands of years ago, the land is still bouncing back.
Exactly. And it highlights how what we think of as solid ground is actually anything but static.
Wow.
It's constantly responding to forces we might not even realize.
This is seriously blowing my mind. So Everest is growing thanks to a combo of tectonic plates and river erosion.
Mm-hmm.
But what does that actually mean for the mountain's future?
That is the question.
Like, how might it look different in 2075?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting, and we'll delve into that right after a quick break.
Oh, actually, you know what? We're not going to take a break today.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, we're just going to power right through this.
All right, sounds good.
So right before the break, we were talking about how Everest is expected to keep growing.
Right.
And I'm curious, How could those extra centimeters actually change the mountain?
Yeah.
Like, will we even see a difference in 2075?
That's a great question, and it brings up some fascinating possibilities.
Really?
Even small changes in height can reshape the landscape around the mountain.
Hmm.
We might see steeper slopes, shifting glaciers,
Okay.
and even changes to the routes climbers use to reach the summit.
So those few extra centimeters could actually make climbing Everest even more challenging than it already is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yikes.
And it's not just about the physical challenges for climbers.
Right.
Remember that fragile ecosystem around Everest?
Yeah.
It's home to some pretty rare plants and animals.
Hmm.
As the mountain grows and the climate keeps changing,
Right.
those ecosystems could face serious disruptions.
Yeah, that's a point. The news website really emphasized the impact of climate change on the Himalayas.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It sounds pretty alarming.
Yeah, melting glaciers, increased risk of avalanches and landslides.
Wow.
And all that meltwater has to go somewhere.
Right.
It ends up in the rivers, which are already prone to flooding.
Oh.
As the glaciers shrink, we could see even more extreme flooding in the region.
Really?
Yeah, directly affecting those communities downstream.
Wow, so it's like a chain reaction.
Pretty much, yeah.
What happens on Everest doesn't stay on Everest.
Exactly. And there's another aspect we haven't touched on yet.
Okay, what's that?
The human element.
Okay.
The Sherpa people who live in the Everest region have this incredible connection to the mountain.
Right.
It's woven into their culture, their history, their very way of life.
Yeah, the Smithsonian article talked about that too, how Everest is considered a sacred mountain for the Sherpas.
Right.
Their lives are so closely tied to the environment surrounding it.
So as the mountain changes, their way of life might have to adapt as well.
That's a good point.
That raises important questions about how we can preserve their culture
Right.
and support sustainable development in the face of all these environmental shifts.
It's a good reminder that the story of Everest goes far beyond just geology and adventure.
Yeah, for sure.
It's about people, culture, and that delicate balance between humans and the natural world.
Absolutely. And it's a story that's still being written.
Mhm.
What we see happening on Everest today is just a snapshot in time.
Right.
By 2075, the mountain could look vastly different, presenting even greater challenges and opportunities.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah, we have.
Everest is growing due to plate tectonics and river erosion.
Hmm.
Climate change is impacting the region,
Right.
and these changes could significantly affect the environment, the Sherpa people, and even climbers.
Yeah,
But I guess the big question is, what does it all mean?
right.
What are the key takeaways for someone trying to grasp the future of Everest?
Well, for me, the biggest takeaway is that even something as massive and seemingly permanent as Mount Everest is subject to change.
Wow.
It reminds us that the Earth is dynamic, constantly reshaping itself.
It's like that saying, the only constant is change, right?
Exactly, but on a much grander scale.
Yeah.
And even small changes can have huge consequences. It's like a butterfly effect, but with mountains and glaciers instead of butterflies.
And it's a reminder that we can't just focus on the mountain itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of a bigger picture, a
Right.
whole ecosystem, a region, and ultimately the entire planet.
Right. What happens on Everest has ripple effects elsewhere and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
We need to start thinking more holistically about how we approach these challenges.
So it's not just about conquering the mountain.
No.
It's about preserving its future and the future of everything connected to it.
Exactly. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
We're only beginning to scratch the surface of understanding the complex forces at play here.
Hmm.
There's still so much we don't know.
That's a bit humbling, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
We think we have it all figured out, but nature always has a way of surprising us.
It certainly does. And that brings us to another important point.
Okay.
We've talked about how mountains change over time, how they're not as fixed as we might assume.
Right.
But what about other things we take for granted as constants? What else in our world might be more dynamic, more fluid than we realize?
That's a really thought-provoking question, and one we'll leave you with as we wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
What other seemingly unshakable aspects of our world might be in a constant state of flux?
Right.
It's something to ponder as we continue to learn and explore.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to think about, isn't it?
It really is.
Like all this stuff about how mountains change over time.
Right.
It's not as fixed as we might assume.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder what else in our world might be changing right under our noses.
Right. Like what other things do we just sort of take for granted as constants?
It's a great question to consider, and I think thinking about Everest specifically can actually offer some valuable insights into this whole idea of constant change.
Because even though it's, thousands of miles away for most of us.
Yeah.
The changes happening on Everest are connected to, like, bigger global issues, right?
Exactly. It's like holding a magnifying glass up to these challenges facing our planet. Climate change, environmental pressures, cultural shifts.
hmm
They're all playing out on Everest,
Yeah.
just like in countless other places around the world.
But so by understanding what's happening on Everest, we can, like, learn something about these global trends,
Mm.
even if we never set foot on the mountain ourselves.
For sure, it's like a real-world case study with incredibly high stakes.
Wow.
And the solutions we find for Everest could have implications for other fragile ecosystems facing similar pressures.
That makes sense.
Like, for example, if we can figure out how to balance tourism and environmental protection on Everest,
Right.
those strategies could be applied elsewhere.
It's all about finding solutions that work on multiple levels, right? For the mountain, for the people who live there, and for the planet as a whole.
Absolutely.
It's about recognizing those connections and understanding that what impacts one part of the system
Hmm.
affects everything else.
You've hit the nail on the head. We can't think in isolation anymore.
Nope.
Everything is interconnected.
Well, I know I've learned a lot today, and I have to say, it's pretty mind-blowing to think about how much is constantly changing.
Yeah.
Even things we think of as, like, permanent fixtures.
And that's the beauty of it. The world is full of surprises, and there's always something new to discover.
Well said. So, to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive into the future of Everest has sparked your curiosity. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning.
Absolutely.
Who knows what other constants in our world might turn out to be more dynamic than we ever imagined?
Until next time.